This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Steve Gould, old ginger face, coming at you, everybody. The summer's coming to an end, and I couldn't be happier. I like the spring, and I like the fall, my two faves. Winter's not so bad. Summer, not for me, too humid. I got that cheap Irish skin, got no melanin, so usually just kind of in a state of pinkness throughout the summer. So I'm happy for the cool weather. I hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for finding the show. Thank you for all the rating and reviewing that's going on. That always helps. Appreciate it. 5 stars if you can. I love that. Thank you to the Patreon sponsors. The sergeants get shouted out, and then the patrolmen also get access to the Patreon page, and I'll mail both tiers a sticker. If you really love the show and you want to show your support, that's the place to do it, is Patreon. If you can't afford it, or it's not in the budget, or you just can't do it right now, not to worry. The show will always remain free so that the maximum amount of people can hear these crazy stories that law enforcement officers have to live when they do their job, so that you can gain a better appreciation for what it is the men and women of law enforcement actually do. Today's show, very excited about a Southern gentleman. I love the Southern cops. Always great stories, a little bit of a different flavor down there. Excuse me. I'm so excited and choking on my own spit. We have 20-year law enforcement veteran out of the great state of Georgia. He's been a jailer, he's been patrol, crime suppression, currently a canine officer, and also owner of Shield Protection Products. Who I'm talking about is the great John Hill. John, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you, man. How are things down in Georgia? Is it still super sticky?
It has finally started. Like when I stepped out this morning, there was a little coolness in the air. So I'm like you, maybe not as ginger, but I definitely have a little bit of extra insulation that I carry around.
Yep.
So I enjoyed the fall and winter as well. Spring is okay, but yeah, it looks like it's finally maybe starting to turn. We'll probably have a couple of more few days where there'll be a little bit of a hot spell, but bigger guys like me always like the fall and the winter.
Hell yeah. I always think when I see clips from down south that's like, it's labeled like August or July, and I see all you guys running around with your soft body armor on, I'm like, oh man, they must be absolutely cooking.
Yeah, I always, from my experience, one of the like legit real threats that you face, and what I've seen in fellow officers, fortunately never happened to me, is if you get some type of heat exhaustion or heat stroke with the vest. But I've multiple times where we've been out, you're on perimeter, or you're chasing somebody, or whatever the case may be, and you have officers starting to kind of fall out, and you got to take their vest off, and so obviously it's a life-saving piece of equipment, but down south you have to be careful, especially going back 20 years, what the vest used to be when they were 25 pounds, and I mean, they were just huge. Not so much anymore, but that used to be a real thing that you kind of had to keep an eye out when you were outside in the heat with your fellow officers, making sure people weren't falling out.
Damn, yeah, I never even thought about that, but yeah, I mean, just standing on a post in Georgia in August is you probably sweat like crazy, sweat right through your uniform.
Oh yeah, it can be extreme. One of my first FTOs, and it's actually a thing now. I forget the name of it, but he actually took vacuum hoses and put it over the
I've
vent
seen
with,
those.
old redneck chrome, and would stick it down his vest. And years later, he lamented. He was like, I should have made that a thing, because it's a thing now. But he was doing that before I ever saw it out on the market.
No kidding. Yeah, that's a great idea. Those things look awesome. I mean, it gets real sticky in the Northeast too, to the point where you know how it is when you take your vest off in the summer and like you got to air it out for the next shift. You can't be washing the carrier every day because it's such a pain in the neck to get the adjustments back and all that. So then they're building police departments here, and they probably do it down there. In the locker rooms, the lockers are actually vented with AC, so you can hang your vest in there and the cool, dry air just runs over your vest when you're off duty, which I've never experienced, but what a great idea.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've not heard of that, but yes, that is a good idea.
Hell yeah, man. You guys should definitely have it down there. So you got 20 years and you've done a lot of different things, but sounds like you started at the big house. You started as a CO.
I did. So when I got hired on in Augusta, Georgia, for those of you that point of reference, home of the Masters, that's what Augusta
Right.
is known for. Um, there's always a need for officers in the jail environment. So I actually got hired as a road patrol deputy, but what they would do is it was, hey, you've got 9 months until your academy date, or you're going to give us a year. And I think I did just under a year in the jail, but that was kind of waiting on my turn to go to the academy. But it's a great introduction. I was definitely green, wet behind the ears. Grew up in a middle class home. My dad owned businesses. My mother was a principal. Like I definitely wasn't out there living the life as a high schooler. So to be 23 years old and get thrown in that jail environment, where I always tell people, out on the street, they say it's the 1 out of 100 that's the bad guy, and everyone
Right.
else is the good. Well, in jail, it's 100 out of 100.
Right.
So yeah, that was a sink or swim situation for me, and I definitely had to have an adjustment period.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about that before on the show where it really is. I mean, a lot of guys don't want to do it and actually avoid agencies where they know they're going to have time in the jail. But it really is a great training period for new officers to have just day-to-day interactions with criminals, get to know them, get to know how they think, the language they use. It really is a great precursor to actually going on the road, especially, sounds like you had a similar childhood as me, especially when you're not, you didn't grow up in the inner city. You're not mixing it up with people that are becoming felons. You're new to it. You have no idea what the culture is like with these people. And then in the jail, like I said, you get to see it every day, and that can do nothing but help you on the road when you start dealing with these people.
Oh, absolutely. I remember looking back on that. In Augusta, that is the third largest sheriff's department in the state of Georgia. It's a large agency. And I think a lot of agencies are like this. It's, you're not getting 2 months of training for that. I mean, for me, it was like, hey, come up here, new guy. This is the east side. This is the west side. In the middle is rec yard and basketball court. Never shall the two meet. Don't ever pop both of those doors at the same times, or we're going to have problems. And, here's the sally port, the double doors. You never open both doors at the same time. Here's the rules of the jail. I think someone was with me for about half a shift, and they were like, hey, man, you got it. Good luck.
Godspeed.
And so, you're 23. Yeah, you've got guys that are, like in their 40s or their 50s, some of them, I mean, that have just been in the prison system for a long time. And the big thing was, when you came out in the morning, you were either out or you were in. You either came out for breakfast and kind of that morning time to be out kind of in the pod, or you didn't. But being new, everyone was, hey, CO, can you pop door 6? Hey, C. And so I was like the most popular guy there because I'm like, yeah, bang, bang, open, got you. And the board would be green or red. Green if the door was shut, red if the door was open. And they knew not to leave the doors open, but they knew they had a new guy. And we had this guy, he was a tower sergeant. And so he would just kind of go up the floors and check on everything. Old school, big guy, like didn't want to mess with them. The inmates didn't mess with them. He was intimidating. He was intimidating when he came onto the floor with you. And I remember him coming in and just going, what in the hell have you? He's like, it looks like your board looks like a Christmas tree. What in the hell are you doing? So he really got on me, and the inmates saw that, and then it was a quick lesson. Like, okay, they've gotten over on the new guy. I got to be a little more on guard. So I learned quick Learned a whole new form of sign language because they're talking through 12 inches of glass. And so you're signaling back and forth with them with this like unique, uh, language that they use when they're asking for store call or they're asking for certain things. It was very, very interesting. And my first lesson, I think don't be a pushover, but treat people kindly. And it broke me of any thoughts of, I guess, being kind of that new kind of badge heavy 23-year-old. Because when you would go out there, and I had one incident where this guy was just driving me crazy. I think he was wanting something out of his cell. And so he'd keep knocking on the glass, knocking on the glass. And some of the other
So they could request
guys,
to be let out, John, and the jailer could open the door for them. They could come and go from their
yeah,
cells.
so you had a board in front of you, and it had numbers of every cell, and you could pop that door remotely. And so what he was doing is when they were in, I mean, there'd be like a little, the little glass. I mean, you could see him trying to wave, but you ignored that. But this guy, they had to get up on a chair to get high enough to get to your glass, which was a no-no anyway. But he kept knocking on the glass. What I think he wanted someone out of a cell. And I had been told by some of the CEOs that had time, like, you cannot let these guys push you around. And at some point, you're going to have to show them that you can handle yourself. So if someone tries to get over on you, at some point, you're going to have to draw that line in the sand with somebody and let everyone else see it. And so I was like, well, this is the guy, because I've told this guy stop 3-4 times. Like, he's just not listening to me. Like, this is where I make my stand. 1 week into being in the jail, like, here I go. I'm going to show him I'm not to be messed with.
Right.
So we had rovers that would come up to each tower and check on you, relieve you, and they would usually hand out the razors, take the razors up, hand out toilet paper, take it. So I said, no, I'm going to go out on the floor. I'll do the razor count because I need to deal with this guy. And you're 12 feet off the ground, so everyone looks smaller. And I'm not a small guy by any means, but I went down there and I'd already like motioned the guy, like, come here, let him know, like, I'm coming on the floor to deal with you. And I got on that floor, and this was a decent sized guy. He was maybe, I don't know, 6'1", 6'2", 200 pounds. I was a lot lighter back then. I was about 6'5", 240. So I'm not a small guy. But you just looked at the guy and you're like, my hour and a half, 4 times a week in like the local LA Fitness is not keeping up with this guy who has nothing to do but just work out in his cell. Like, this dude's in here for like, this floor I was on, they were state prisoners coming back for some type of trial. So he was in there for like armed robbery, murder. I mean, I was on the 5th floor, which is a serious floor, and you could just see it in his eyes. You're like, this is a different kind of guy.
Yeah.
And then you realize, as everyone kind of sees this starting to form up, you kind of see this semicircle, and you realize none of these people are going to be for me. If we go to the ground, this is not going to work out. And then you glance up and you realize the guy in the tower, like, he's dealing with the West. He's not really watching me the way I would hope in case this goes bad. So right there on the spot, I learned the value of de-escalating, and I quickly made the decision. I don't think this needs to be my stand right here. So it was, I did it in a way where I was like, hey, this can't happen for this reason. He's got to stay in, but if X, Y, and Z happens, then he could be let out at lunch, or whatever it was I did to diffuse, and then got back in the tower. But that was my first real awakening that, if someone doesn't, the badge only really works for like your typical law-abiding citizen. When someone doesn't care about the badge, like, it holds no power. It's just you and him. And I had to decide quickly, is this something I really want to get into a really involved altercation with this guy with 60 other people around that are not on my side? So that was my first real wake-up call.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah, that's something. Yeah. I would pick like the little guy with glasses, did some kind of financial crime. Be like, let me beat the tar out of this guy.
Yeah.
Not the murderer.
Yeah, luckily, I had a couple of guys that kind of tried me a little bit, but luckily I never had to get into a physical altercation there. Mostly because most of the time you were just up there in the tower, so they would happen, but you had no way to get to them. You had to call, and deputies would rush in.
And you're the perfect size.
Because
I mean, you're 6'5", 240. That's going to deter 80% of people anyways, you know what I mean? That's
oh yeah,
I'm
yeah,
5'10", 200, and just kind of an average size dude. So it would probably be, I'd probably have to be meaner.
yeah. Oh, and I'm 240 was when I was 23. I'm not 240 anymore. I can promise you. That was a much lighter weight, but yeah, you just realize like there are times when you have to go with somebody, but you just realize like make sure that it's a time when you have to go and you're not creating the situation. I just kind of realized like this is not the time to try to show out in front of everybody. I have calculated this wrong because 60 other dudes around that are just gonna wait for me to go to the ground. Like 60 on one is not good numbers for me.
Yeah. At very
So
least,
that,
they're
that was a
not going to help
lesson.
you at all. They're just going to watch if something goes bad.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that was a lesson that stuck with me early, and something that carried me into the streets, and I think definitely helped me out. But that was a kind of a trial by fire there.
Yeah, absolutely. John, can you take us to when you were on the road to your first hot call, the first call where you had like an adrenaline dump, got your heart pounding?
I can. I'm going to kind of briefly tell a kind of a quick story before that, and then kind of the story that really stuck with me. Um, when I got out on the road, I got paired with my FTO, and in the police academy, they kind of tell you, look, most law enforcement is, kind of dull. It's the damaged vehicle. It's the, someone lost their purse, or the domestic where she just wants him to leave, and it's just a verbal. That's a lot of what law enforcement is, and that's true. But when I got paired with my FTO, he was a traffic unit, and I think my first 2 weeks we got involved in six. We call them 1080s down here, but six chases, and it was like every time I turned around, we were getting in a chase, and everyone foot bailed. Um, Everyone would bush bond, and so my TFO was probably about the age I am now looking back on it. And so he knew I was the young guy. I was in shape back then. So as soon as that door would open, I mean, it was like releasing a dog. He'd go get him. And I would run. And then he knew the cross street
You
to
were the
come around and
canine
meet me,
unit.
right? Like pretty much. And so I just remember going, man, I don't know who said this isn't like World Wildest Police videos, but yes, it is, because we chase people every time. So we got on a run there. So there was a lot of adrenaline during those first few months of my FTO phase. But the first one that really sticks with me, I had just been released, so I had just wasn't even assigned a beat. I was a relief driver, So when someone's off for the day or calls in, I mean, you're jumping in a spare car and riding that beat for the day. And we got a call. They put it out as just an accident. It was that a car had T-boned another car, and so I'm heading that way. And then dispatch came and said, "Be advised, it's either another accident, or the two cars have struck each other again." And so you go, I don't even know. You don't even know what to make of that. And so for us, they would drop a tone. So you'd hear kind of a boop, and then when the tone drops, everyone perks up because it's fixing to be something. And then as they were getting information, they would update the call and say, be advised that one vehicle is intentionally striking the other. So then, that's lights and sirens. I've got another deputy from the next beat over coming to meet me. And we pulled up about the same time. It was an estranged husband. I don't recall if they were divorced. I just know they weren't together. But the wife was with a boyfriend and had kids in the car, kids of the estranged husband and the wife. And I guess husband just snapped, had enough, rammed the car, got out, shot the boyfriend. Mom starts
Jeez.
running. Yeah, about the time we pull up, you see it was these apartments, so you could see the mom kind of run back around behind the apartment, like they disappeared, like with the guy in chasing her. And you don't really, looking back on it, I was not, I was operating in like black, like I wasn't making rational decisions, because if I'd have thought about it, I'd have been like, well, they're just going to horseshoe and come back to me. But I gave chase. So it was 1, 2, and then me in the back. And about the time I'd get to a corner, I'd see the guy like rounding the next corner. I could never really get line of sight. And then they hit like the third side of the building. So they'd have been coming back around the front, and then you could hear gunshots when he'd shot her. And by the time I got up there, she's on the ground, screaming. The kids are screaming. The boyfriend is in the car, and then the guy gets in his car. And so the other deputy had arrived by then. So, we're giving him commands, and really before I could even realize what he was doing, he turned the gun on himself. And so
Wow.
I just remember you just go, that's not something that they train you for in the police department. And as strange as it is, but you can relate to this, Steve, when when people don't know what to do, they get stuck in their OODA loop, right? So they just kind of repeat the same thing because they don't have a tool in the tool bag to know what to do.
Right.
So I just remember the gun was resting on his lap, and it had just been hammered into us so much in police academy, show your hands, give me the gun, that I actually was kind of caught in this trap of like, they didn't ever say, hey, when someone shoots themselves in the head, it's okay to go up and just grab the gun and secure it because he's dead.
Right.
Obviously I know that, but the senior FTO had to kind of be like, hey, you can holster like this. We need to render aid. Just go put the gun on the hood of the car. Try not to grab it too much. But that was my full blown adrenaline dump. Where
Damn, I'd say, man.
Yeah, I definitely handled that like a rookie. It was almost so much it was overload, and so you kind of revert back to what you know. And someone who had just got done doing felony stops, and had no real experience doing them. Looking back, I just remember kind of being stuck in that. And you see that sometimes in videos where, someone's just yelling the same command over and over and over. And it's like, brother, you got to switch to something else because what you're doing is not. That was me. And then the senior deputy came in and knew how to handle things and started giving me commands and telling me what to do, because I was lost in the sauce at that point. It was like, holy crud, like this is it. This is real. So that was my first moment where it was really adrenaline dump and kind of overload.
That's nuts, man. That's why we have senior patrolmen on shifts with younger guys. That's why we have FTO. That's why we have sergeants, because there's really no. You can go on ride-alongs and you can go to police academy, but a super high stress situation like that, you need to grow some calluses. Like it's gonna. You need some senior people there to be like, all right, I can see what's happening with this officer, and I'm just going to start telling him what to do. I'm going to give him some more, give him a job, give him some orders, take him out of it, and it's that's going to help him out. But yeah, man, that's how long under the job was that? You were just out of FTO?
Yeah, I was probably within my first month being relief driver. So.
Damn,
yeah,
man.
It was a lot. It was overload at the time. So I was glad that I had that senior officer show up. And I had ridden him. He wasn't my main FTO, but they your FTO is going to have off days. They're going to, sometimes you get put with other people. So I had ridden with him some. So he had some familiarity with me, and I think he just knew to step in and kind of take charge, because he probably had, as much time as I have now, if not more. So for him, he just, and I remember being impressed by that. It was like, okay, here's what we have, here's what we're going to do. And he just started, hey, you need to do this, go render aid, call EMS. Once everyone's taken care of, we stop bleeding, put crime scene tape up, keep these people back. And you're just like, oh man, okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I can remember having moments like that, John, where when you're a young cop and the sergeant is there or senior patrol, and they're just running the scene, and you're thinking in your head, am I ever going to be able to do that? Like, you just feel
Right.
you feel kind of powerless, and then of course you think back to the event, and you're like, man, you're just like, you just feel bad about yourself a little bit, although you reacted totally normally and it was fine. You didn't brown out, but it's like, it's a lot, and it's intimidating to see a vet do it, and when you're brand new.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Damn, man, that was a that was a good one. John, can you describe a strange or bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
There's no lack of those.
And I'm sure we're gonna have the interview, and then later you're gonna text me and be like, "I thought of like three more stranger ones," because that's what happens every time.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's one. It's also kind of a humorous story in hindsight. Um, I remember I was driving, I was patrolling. Um, I was a canine handler at this time, assigned to a crime suppression unit. So we would kind of patrol, high crime areas. So it was this trailer park I was riding through. There was known problems there. And as I'm just kind of looking down the rows of trailers, all the trailers, they're all off the ground, like the doorway. So there's little wooden steps that go up, but all the doors are like 4 feet off the ground. I see this lady. She's not even on the landing, just from inside the doorway. I mean, I see her fly backwards and just land on her back, and you're just like, what grizzly bear just pushed that lady out the door? I mean,
Right.
and so I stop and I'm like, ma'am, are you okay? And she's like, they're out of control. They're out of control. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. So I radio in, get another car coming, and I go in, and Steve, to anyone listening, I'm telling you, you had to be there. And Steve, you can attest, when someone is committed to the cause, I'm telling you, size almost becomes irrelevant when you're dedicated to what you're doing. There was a little girl. She was about 9 years old, and she just looks like a wild animal. Um, and the mom was like, "It's her," because I'm looking like who, trying to ascertain from her. And she's like, "No, it's her." And the little girl had some issues, but when she turned, she got violent and she fought with everything she was worth. Put it in perspective. I mean, fight a raccoon. Like, you're not gonna. It's just a very small animal, but you're not gonna
Right.
walk out of there without. So, I kind of try to take the voice of authority with her. I'm like, this is a 9-year-old kid, so I'm like, sit down. What are you doing, acting like this? And she's yelling back at me, and I'm like, I'm not gonna take this anymore. You're gonna sit down, or you're gonna get a spanking. And when I said spanking, that was like a trigger word. And this little girl charged me in this living room, um, with everything. And the problem becomes not that you can't physically handle her. It would have almost been easier if it had been you, because I will handle. You
Right.
know what I'm
You can do
saying? I
you
mean,
can do some violence to a man.
yes, I'm going to lay you out. A 9-year-old girl, you're aware of who you're dealing with, so you know, pardon the pun, but you're trying to deal with kid gloves with her. But she is kicking, she is punching, she is scratching, she is biting. And when she charged, that little girl, I'm 6'5", she was about waist level with me. And I'm telling you, she came in mouth wide open, willing to bite. And she was going to get me on my inner thigh or worse. And
Oh,
at some point, you just go, hey, it doesn't matter who you are. That's not going to happen. So I just kind of sidestepped and redirected her, because she's on a dead run. And she hit into the wall and turned around and went up a level where you're like, this isn't good. So she charges me again. I grab her by the hands and I'm holding her like this because she weighed nothing. But she almost could do like a pull up, and then she'd go to bite your wrist. Well, you don't want to be bit by anybody.
yeah.
So when she does that, you automatically let go. So then she kind of swings one way, and I think like her legs hit into a lamp. She knocked down a lamp, and every time this happened, she just got more amped. And So then then you grab her by the leg and you kind of got her sideways, and then she's going for the, and so I was trying to take her back to this. The mom came in, was like, her bedroom's back there. Like, we typically hold her down on the bed. So you can imagine the hallway of a trailer, super narrow. And every time she's going to bite, or if she's going to kick, 'cause she knew where to kick. She knew,
Right.
even a guy my size, she was dialed in on where to aim. And so as you're trying to kind of maneuver her around, you just can't help but kind of bang into walls. And every time we banged into a wall, man, that made her so mad. Um, so I get her on the bed and I've got her pinned down. I've got her arms. Mom's holding her legs. Like the other deputy shows up and they're on the radio like, what do you got? What do you got? And I'm like, I'm, in trailer 11 in the back, and they come flying in, because to go back, I wasn't doing a good job of answering the radio because I was kind of trying to hold this girl. And when I would answer, they could just hear her and the commotion. So I know they're thinking, man, Hill must be into it with somebody.
Right. He's wrestling some big dude.
Face. Oh yeah, it's this other crime suppression deputy, and the look on his face when he walked in, and it's like this 9-year-old girl, and I've got her arms pinned down on the bed, of like, you've got to be kidding me. And I remember going, dude, you don't know, you weren't here. This is like fighting a feral animal.
Right.
I mean, yeah, 60 pounds. That's like a honey badger. Like, I don't care what the size.
Well, if you ever fought with a
point,
drunk woman, full-size woman, try to get her in cuffs,
oh yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
it's surprising.
yeah. So, I'm holding her down, and it's like, calm down, calm down. And the other deputy gets to the point where he's like, dude, like, what are we doing? Like, we got to clear up for this, man. Like, you've been here. And this girl won't calm down. So I kind of start trying to bargain with her because I get desperate to leave. I have to leave the situation remedied. I just can't leave with her being so combative. Like, I can't calm her down. And so it becomes this bargaining thing, and everything's no, and she's trying to spit, and she's biting. And then it just clicked. Okay, how about we try this? And I said, well, you know what? I've got a dog in my car, and he likes to meet kids. But the way you're acting, you're not going to get to see my dog. And a switch turned on her, and she said, I can be good. I can be good. I mean, she was done.
Yeah.
And now, look, I didn't take her straight out there to meet, my dog's name at the time was Renzo, because there was some, but I
Hey,
talked
John,
to her 5 minutes. And
John, sorry to interrupt you, but are you clicking a pen, or do you have something on the desk that you're tapping? I just hear a weird clicking sound. Okay. It's just in the audio line then. Don't worry about it. Sorry.
Okay.
Back to getting the dog.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
So I finally get convinced where I can, I can take her out there, and I open the back door, and Renzo was a great dog. And, I get Renzo out, and, yeah, I actually, kind of held her hand and let Renzo sniff her hand. That was about as much as I was willing to do. But then I had some stuff in the trunk, like a canine coloring book or something, and gave that. And she left. She was a completely different kid.
Jeez.
So that's one of those stories where just completely caught me off guard. I walked in thinking it was going to be one thing. I was just going to give this girl a talking to, and yeah, it was also a big learning experience. But that was one that sticks out.
Yeah, it's tough dealing with kids like that are out of control. Because, like you said, what is the recourse for them? You're not gonna hit the kid. You're not gonna use pain compliance. You're not gonna do any of that stuff. And I know in Massachusetts a few years back they changed. It used to be you couldn't charge a kid with a crime if they were 7 years old or younger, and they bumped that up to 12 now. So what's it like in Georgia? Like say she does get a bite on you and takes a chunk of skin out, mayhem or whatever you guys charge for that, or say you wanted to charge a kid with anything, with murder. What's the age limit in Georgia?
So at that age, they're not going to do anything. It's been a while since I've dealt with juveniles, because being on the canine side of the house, but it's 13 is um, how I understand it. That may have changed because, like I say, you get kind of so specialized. It's the same thing with working in
Oh,
domestic.
of
I
course.
would be so rusty at working in domestic now, but I do know this. Here comes the problem. It almost becomes counterproductive to charge because the other thing is all that really happens is they have to go to court. The parents have to take time out. It becomes this burdensome for the parents, and then the parents realize nothing's going to happen. They're going to get put on probation, and
Right.
really nothing.
Then they scrub the
Um,
juvenile record when they get older, and
right. So we would have parents like, please take them down here. YDC, the youth detention center. Like we would threaten that sometimes as a bluff. We're like, hey, we're going to take you, and the parents would be like, no, do it. And then you had to pull them aside and go, we
please.
actually can't. Right, because YDC, we can call that intake officer, but there's so many kids down there for, armed robbery or some type of violent sexual offense or murder or attempted murder. Like, I understand they stole the car, and that's not good, but YDC is probably not going to take them. And to be honest, if this is the worst thing they've done, you don't want them to go to YDC
Yeah,
because what they're going to be exposed to there is not what we want for this child.
more
That was the
trauma.
other thing. You had kids. You go, hey, this kid's making some bad decisions, um, but I don't think they're there where they're full blown going down the wrong path. But you send them to YDC, they're going to get an education that you don't want them to get, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. That's like in Mass. They do. We have like used to be chins. Now it's called like crawl, like a child requiring assistance. They might get. There won't be charges, but they will get involved. Like a judge will give some orders, like curfew stuff, and like you can't be hitting your mom. You can't do this, and the court will kind of follow them, and the state will provide maybe psychologist visits. Try to get them on track without exposing them to like the kind of facility you're talking about. But I'm the same way, man. When I get a call, and if it's not an emergency, but it's like, there's a kid up in such and such street violating the craw order. First thing I do is pull over. I got a juvenile law book about that thick, and I'm like, what the hell can I do with this kid? Because it's like, thankfully where I work, it doesn't come up a lot. But when it does, I always brush up because it's like, you don't want to go there and be saying things that you can't do to the parent, or you know what I mean.
Right.
I want to have the answers for them. It's just a shame, and usually, as you know, usually kids like this, unless it is like a congenital thing with their brain or whatever, usually they're just a product of poor
Right.
parenting, poor the atmosphere they were raised in. They grow this kind of rage is their only response. The only reaction they get is when they are completely out of control. The only way for them to get any influence over the adults because the parents are just not doing a good job.
Right. I think there's a lot of that. And listen, I don't say this to get in hot water with anybody. I mean, everyone's circumstance is different. Um, but a big thing that I would see where we could come in and kind of rectify it sometimes on the spot. Um, you have a single mama and she's raising a baby boy. That's one thing. But when he becomes a young man,
Mm,
and starts making bad decisions, and that testosterone's at like 800, and he starts to become a man child. That's hard for moms to deal with sometimes.
yes.
And there, look, that's not a knock in any way. I mean, it just is what it is. So there were a lot of times we'd come in, and you could kind of be that male authority. I'll tell you this: the same senior officer that showed up on that call where the estranged husband, we got called to an unruly juvenile one time. And this was an old school cop. So if I came in 04, I mean, this guy was like mid to late 80s, like 90s. It was just a different breed of cop.
Sure.
Um, and we show up, and this kid's probably 15 or 16, and mom's doing her best. Mom's involved. Kid's just making bad decisions. You're like, what's the problem? He's like, well, I told him to get out and cut the grass. What's Saturday morning? It sounds reasonable to me. And, he's F that B and da da da. And this senior deputy's like, that's your mom. You don't talk that way. Man, F you too, da da da. So he takes off his gun belt, hands it to me, takes off his inner leather belt, doubles it up, and says, I am fixing to wear you out with this belt right here in front of your mother. And Mom was like, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. And it
Wow.
didn't get to that point because you could see the realization come across that kid's face of like, he's serious. And he was. That would have happened. I understand why, by policy, or I understand why that can't happen. But sometimes the way things are written and what works on the streets are two different things. That kid got the realization of like, this is just a essentially a more dominant male is in this house, and I'm not going to push him around. His demeanor changed. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. No, sir. And I remember he said, me and my partner are going to go take a lunch break, and we're going to roll back by here in about 45 minutes. And if you're not out cutting that grass, I'm going to come back in and you're going to see this belt. We went, I forget where we went. And the whole time I'm just on, like, I'm on pins and needles. Like, I'm ready for the lunch
You're like,
break to
please
get
be
over.
mowing the lawn, kid.
Yeah. And he's like, orders the extra. He's not worried at all. So he was like, all right, let's roll back over there. So I followed him back over there. And, he chirped to Simon real quick and slowed down, put the window down, and the kid's out there pushing the mower. And he's like, yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir. And we rolled on. I don't ever remember getting a call from that house again, but the mama was thankful.
Yeah.
So that just kind of goes to your point of maybe everything we have to be sometimes. It's not all about, writing a report or getting them in front of a judge. And this, you have to play a lot of different roles. And sometimes it
A lot of
was,
hats.
hey, you're a young man. Yeah, but we're going to teach you that, one, your mom's going to be the biggest advocate you'll ever have. So treating her like that isn't going to fly. But then we're going to take you out of the you're a big fish in a little pond. We're going to show you what it's like when you act like that in a bigger pond. Because you get out there treating people other than your mother that way, you'll get out here and get killed or hurt.
Yeah. Absolutely,
So
man. That's I think that's just a fact, is that young men especially need a strong male role model in their life, and if they don't have it, things can really go off the rails. And it's just data. I've even seen studies when they said that if a family doesn't have a father, they have all the stats on the kids and how they get into crime. If the family doesn't have a mother, it doesn't happen. And it's a real hard thing to look at because there's a lot of single moms out there, and programs like Big Brothers and sports with a good, strong coach or a local cop that can really make a difference in a young man's life. But that masculine authority in a household really is needed for most kids to prosper. And it's not a definite, it's not always, but it's the majority of kids that don't have that can really go off the rails quick, especially young men. They need, we have 3 kids, and I can count on one hand how many times they've been spanked. It hasn't been a lot of spankings, but we will not spare the rod, spoil the child. Like if it's
right.
If it's blatant disobedience or a safety issue, there's going to be a crack. Like there's going to be a quick and severe correction. And for a little kid, that can just be a swat on the bottom, but it's devastating to them because it's like it rocks their world.
Right.
But if you do that, if you really have a good bearing on when it's appropriate to do that, it like I said, 3 kids, one hand, how many times we've had to do that, and it shocks them. It teaches them an instant lesson. It's embarrassing for them. They don't ever want it to happen again. You know what I mean? I think there is a real place for it, and the state I'm in has actually backed that up with case law. They tried to try parents here because they left a mark. That was a big thing. You can spank your kid, but you can't leave a mark. Well, there was a ruling in our superior court that said, no, absolutely not. If you spank your kid, they might have a red handprint on their bottom. That's okay. You shouldn't be injuring your kid. Like the cop shouldn't show up to a broken arm, like stuff like that.
Right.
But there's definitely a place for it. So yeah, like you said, my hat's off to your partner there. But yeah, nowadays you can imagine what he might be facing if someone, whips their camera phone out for that, or is like, he's threatening violence on this young man, when really what the kid, he really needed a strong male figure to put him in his place,
Yeah, that was a different era, and like I say, that not you couldn't do that in today's world. But I'll tell you this as a quick sidebar. I remember being 23 years old. So Augusta, Richmond County, the cars were black and silver, right? The old black and silvers. Um, and I remember pulling up, getting out, putting that campaign hat on, and some guy that's like, in his 30s or 40s that is, spent years in prison, or he's just out there like that. He's a real legit guy, right? Not a guy to be messed with. And I'd come up, and everything would either be sir, or if they'd been in prison, usually boss. Yes, boss. What you need, boss? And I gave them respect, but they definitely gave me respect too. Um, and that was that generation that came before me, like the senior officer I'm talking about. They demanded that, and they would give respect, but it was from that generation. You get up talking crazy in a deputy's face from that era, it wasn't going to go well for you. And I really feel like they kind of paved the way where, man, people respected the black and silver. Black and silver rolled up. They just knew, like, you don't play around, because these guys are, Richmond County is about it if
Right.
need be. But then you could see the change where, to my point, this dude who's in his 30s or 40s, you're like, man, this guy, his criminal history is lengthy. Like, this guy's, and then you get some 16-year-old just running their mouth. But things had changed by then, and they had not. It was no longer the era of you better talk respectfully, or there's going to be consequences. They knew they could just pop up at the mouth, and I think I came in when I could see that change happening.
Yeah, kind of like we've been riding their coattails and it's wearing off now. It's like, because
Pretty much.
I've dealt with juveniles that are like brazenly disrespectful, and it's like, it's shocking to me, because I was raised by a cop, and I was always raised to have respect for adults and anybody in a position of authority and all that stuff. So when you have a youngster to start mouthing off to you and disrespecting you, it's like, it's unbelievable. It's almost like, you want their parents there, you want someone to give them a crack. It's like, this is unreal. Your life's going to go poorly. Like, this is a bad omen for how the rest of your life is going to go if you don't straighten up. It's a real shame, and obviously everything that's going on in our portrayal in the media and all that is just further eroding that respect, because of the way they take any opportunity to misrepresent what we do out there. So that's a whole nother can of worms, John. But can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call?
Most intense or terrifying, Carl? I tell you, the first one I told definitely ranks up there. Um, there's another one. I don't know if it is the most intense or terrifying, but it definitely ranks up there. And it was another one of those where you just go, what do I do now? It was the first time that I contemplated deadly use of force, where I was like, I think I may have to shoot this guy. So I was I was still on patrol, and I got a call about a pit bull puppy had been stolen. So, some of these breeds of dogs, these designer breeds, are, people are selling puppies for $2,000 a puppy.
Right.
And so they had this litter and had these puppies for sale. They were right inside of a fenced in front yard, just like a 4-foot chain link fence. And they had seen this guy they were inside the home looking out, and they'd seen this guy come, just kind of reach over the fence and scoop up a puppy and take off down the road. And they got in the car and followed him. They were on the phone with dispatch, so we got sent. And then it came out that the suspect was striking their truck with a metal rod. So I stepped it up, get there quicker, and they're in the middle of a fairly busy intersection at this point. It's like a state highway with like a county road. It's a 4-way intersection. There's traffic. So I pull up into the intersection, stop the car, get out. He did not have that pole at the time. I honestly, I didn't even really think to see where it was, but so I address him, start giving commands. he starts coming towards me. He's got all these, what we would call pre-assault indicators, but he's got his teeth clenched. He's got fists balled up. I mean, he is marching towards me with a mission, like he's ready for a fight.
Right.
So, I think not by chance most of these stories happened when I was in my first year, because I didn't have the experience under my belt to know what to do with things as much. But so I go to what I'm used to. We used to do the old use of force continuum, right? And
Sure.
so they've kind of done away with that because, so I pull out pepper spray. I pepper spray the guy. No effect. And at that point, I'm backing up to keep distance. He's coming towards me. At some point, I become aware, like, there's that metal object he must have been hitting the truck with. Like, you could see it. And it was like I recognized it at the same time he did. And it was probably offset. There's 10 to 12 feet between us. And it was probably offset 10 feet to my left, so 10 feet to his right. And it was like we both realized at the same moment, like, me, it's not going to be good if he gets this. And then he realizes I need to get this. So as we kind of both are, moving towards it or running towards it, my baton, I say that because I don't even remember drawing my baton. Looking back on it, it was like the baton just was there, extended. And I gave him baton strikes and commands, and then even remember stepping on this metal rod as he went to try to pick it up. So, the weight of my body's on it, and striking the arm closest to me. He gets up, he's coming towards me. I strike him in the legs. I'm striking everywhere they tell you to strike him. And he's just marching towards me. So he backs me up a little bit, and he looks at me, and this is when you're like, oh, crap. He looks at me and goes, that doesn't hurt me. I know karate. And you're like, oh,
Great.
crap. And so you right off the bat, you go, man, this guy's not, there's something going on with him.
Right.
He's not all there. But that is an equally scary thing. I mean, someone who's high or someone who is in the midst of some type of
psychosis
they're
or
having
something.
some type. Yes. It's you're compassionate with them after the fact, but in the middle of it, it really doesn't matter why they're being so violent. They're just being violent.
Right.
You can have some type of disorder, and I feel for you, but if you're trying to stab me with a knife, that's really not relevant to me right then and there. So he backs up and gets this baton, because he just had to take a couple steps back, and it was like a metal rod, about equal length to my baton. And once again, looking back, it's why training evolves. You kind of look at, maybe early training scars. You're always taught whenever you practice with the spray and the batons, it's when you go to recertify, it's, spray, 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 off, hand up, and then, holster, right? Or the baton, it's up in the high ready, strike, strike, give the commands. The guy gets down and, holster the baton in the open position. Well, I remember freezing for a second and going, I've got spray in my offhand. I carried my baton on my strong. I didn't like a cross draw. I remember thinking for a sec, like, what the crap do I do with these? Because no one, like, we've never practiced. You've got spray and baton in your hand, and you need to immediately go to your gun.
Right.
And I remember having that thought. So I quickly made a decision on that. And got my hands free. And about the time I was going to my gun, I think if this guy picks this thing up and starts swinging at me, I think I've got to shoot him.
Sure.
I remember being nervous about that. Like, another deputy had responded, and this is a thing I was guilty of. I think I got better of it as my years went on. But auditory exclusion, tunnel vision. Well, I had radioed all the way up to, I've made contact. He's coming towards me. 10-3 the net, which is no radio traffic. I'm in something serious. But I heard not one time anybody calling me on the radio. I was so locked into
Yeah.
that. Everything else just went by the wayside. So, you know, one of the sergeants, you talk about just being calm. I mean, after they called me 2 or 3 times, he went ahead and called, hey, 128, go ahead and be en route, go 1018, which is lights and sirens. And I think he called a signal 32 on my behalf, which is that signal 32, everyone's coming. That's officer needs help. And about the time I'm like, I think I'm going to have to shoot this guy, I see this black and silver just come around. Like I said, it was intersection. So he came around the corner. I mean, like Dukes has just fishtailing, runs up, gets out, doesn't miss a beat, not unclear about what to do, takes out his baton, and aiming for the upper arm may have struck somewhere else, and it ended up just being a tomahawk, and just knocked the guy out, and that was the end of it. And so that one there, that was another one where
That's intense, man.
It was the first time I had dealt with that, because even the first story, that was intense, but I was aware that guy had shot himself in the head. I just didn't quite know what to do with that, because it was so outside the scope of anything. But that one, you're like, oh crap, like this is it. I'm gonna have to shoot this guy. And a million thoughts went through my head. Am I gonna be okay through this? And when I mean be okay, like, am I gonna, this is, they had hammered that in your head. I think this was I understand why they did it. They hammered in your head in the academy so much of, like, you own every round. Every round has your name on it. And so I remember just going, there's cars all around us. Like, traffic is stopped. And I even remember thinking that, like, man, if I miss, where am I going to miss? And so I was so relieved that other deputy showed up and, came in with a decisive plan of action, we'll say, and ended that. And the guy ended up being okay. He had to get some stitches, and I think they, gave him a mental eval. But that was definitely one where in the moment, it was definitely a oh crap moment.
Yeah, it sounds like you did it textbook. I mean, you worked your way through the use of force continuum, and it kind of was getting to the point where, I mean, I suppose if you can shoot the guy, you can hit him in the head with the baton. It's all deadly force.
Yeah, and this is true. And these are things that, as your training increases and you become more aware of things, more experienced, and they've even gotten kind of away from the, at least here they don't really teach the use of force continuum like that, because they realize that a lot of officers were kind of doing it like a checkbox,
Right.
Let
me not get myself sued here. I got to go through every step.
Right. So they've even gotten away from teaching it that way, and then I was taught the old AOJ, ability, opportunity, jeopardy. And so, you're trying to, okay, do I have everything? I want to make sure I'm not in but that was one that definitely comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's good for people to hear that, because I hear that from a lot of officers that come on, is that we're, like the movies, like cops, they sign up to shoot someone. They want that badge and gun so they can get in a gunfight. It's like the opposite. Like, what's going through the officer's mind as things ratchet up is like, oh no, let's not take it here. Let's not do this. Let's not, taking a life is going to weigh, forget about the litigation, but it's going to weigh on your conscience. It's even when it's a total righteous shoot, you're going to have to live with that. You're going to have to,
absolutely,
you're going to go back and you won't be able to help it. Your mind will second guess, like, how could it have went differently? What could have I done different, or whatever, although you had every right to do it, So it's good for people to hear that how careful we are and how much we don't want it to go there. But at the same time, sometimes people just, they earn the holes, it's like there's nothing left to be done. And it's sad too, because when I went through academy, we had our baton instructor was like notorious for using his baton in a city nearby. And the first thing he said, he held it up, and he could get how people were admin was getting afraid of the baton. Just optics. Just because of Rodney King and videos after that of just guys hacking away on somebody, and they just take a 10-second clip of it, and it's like, it just looks not good. when someone's not complying, you're hitting with the baton. But his point of view was like, your chief gave you this because he wants you to use it. And then, then when we got to know the instructor a little bit, we talked to other people he worked with at this department. They're like, oh yeah, that guy, if you even remotely take a fighting stance with him, he goes right to baton. He'll break your knuckles. He hits people in the hands. That's the way this guy's built. He's a fighter. Like he doesn't get. I get ratcheted up. The adrenaline's dumped, and it's like, it's on. This guy's like calm, cool, and collected, like a boxer. Let me just whap. Oh, broke your hands. You know what I mean? He's trying to tell us to do that, and we're like, the other instructors are kind of rolling their eyes, like, oh boy, I hope they don't take all this to heart.
Yeah, I think one thing with me being, just bigger, of a bigger stature, a lot of times, like you say, people don't want to physically test me. I feel like a strong suit of mine is I can talk a situation down, and I've learned to do that. And the biggest thing I've learned, most people, if you'll just explain to them why you're doing what you're doing, they will typically calm down. And if they don't, to me, it's more articulation for me or justification for me to go, okay, this be ready for this to go the other way. You see that a lot when people go, for example, you might walk up and you realize someone has a warrant, and you just order them out of the car, put your hands back. You're right in what you're doing. But I just learned, if they're, what are you doing? Why am I out of the car? If you take 5 seconds to go, sir, you've got a warrant. I have to do this. Let me get cuffs on you, and then I'll look and see what it's for and give you all the information you need, or let you call about your vehicle. I won't leave here until I've done everything I can do to help you. 99% of them will go ahead and calm down. They don't like it, but they'll accept it. But when they don't, and you've given them an explanation, then to me, it clears the lines of, this guy doesn't want a rational explanation. He's going to buck no matter what I do, so I can go ahead and mentally prepare. But I've tried to do that a lot, because most people, you don't have to get into a physical encounter with them. They do happen. But the other thing I've learned is when you walk up, and towards the later part of my career, you start having kids, and maybe the cardio went down a little bit, so
Testosterone's dropped a little bit.
Yeah, so you walk around like, I walk around about maybe 290, 300. Man, you get someone just when 99 other guys are like, that's a big dude. Let's just talk, right? The guy that just doesn't care, you don't get tried as much when you're bigger, but what you learn is they're either like, there's something's not clicking upstairs, or that's just the guy that, like the guy you're talking about, he knows he can go. He knows he's got truck diesel in the engine. And,
right.
It's the guy that's 5'10", 180, but he's been like a brick mason his entire life.
Super strong.
He feels like a knotted up oak tree when you grab him. And I've had to grab, you grab guys like that, and you grab their arm or their shoulder, and you're like, holy crap, this dude feels like steel. And you just realize, I don't care what the size difference is. This dude's fixing to be a tough day at work. Like, this guy's not, it's a different kind of strength. So I'm very key on that. When I see someone and they look ready for the fight, in my head, it's okay. It's not the average guy. This guy has a level of confidence about him, because he is willing. He does not care that I've got 60 pounds and 6 inches on him. You deal with it, but you just keep that in mind and go, there's going to be something there with this dude, because he's very confident.
Yeah. Those are no bueno. Isn't it easier when someone's like fully in the throes of a drug-induced psychosis? It's just easier when they're naked, when you pull up and you're like, okay, no question. Like, he's bashing a car in, but he's also naked. I know where I'm starting at. It's harder when you got to do the initial inquiry and be like, all right, I got to establish that this guy's nuts first before I change my tactics. But when you show up and they're just like an animal, completely nude, breaking windows, you're like, I know what I got. I know what's going on here. John, do you have a positive or heartwarming situation from your career so far?
Yeah, I have a lot of them. Man, there's one that I'll tell. I don't even think I got a call about this guy. I just happened to see him, right? And he was in a store parking lot, and I was just riding through, and you kind of look for normative behavior. What's your baseline? So right, so if you're at like a supermarket or somewhere, I mean, everybody's doing something. They're walking to the store, or they're coming out, or they're actively looking for the car. And when you see someone kind of just in the middle of the parking lot and they're not doing anything, they're just kind of taking in other people. You just go, huh? That's not the norm,
Mm.
right? So that's how this guy caught my attention, and so I was like, okay, I'll just go up and you know, just make contact with them. Uh, kind of a free and voluntary thing, and just see what he's got going on. And I pull the car up. I get out. Hey, man, what's going on today? You're not doing anything wrong. Just want to see if I can help you with anything. And the guy just kind of just breaks down. He was homeless, but he'd had a job. He'd fallen on hard times. He was trying to get to family down in Florida. He had just made it to the location where I was, and just he didn't have a plan to get there. He didn't know what he was going to do, which is why he was just kind of sitting there, because he didn't know what else to do. And I talked to him for a while, got his backstory, and could just tell, like, man, this guy really is he legit is just falling on hard times. And that's a lot of people. I mean, you take my paycheck away for a month or 6 weeks, like I'm starting to make some hard decisions. And unfortunately, the world we live in, most people are that way. And so I just empathize for this guy. Um, and I ended up getting him some things, getting him some toiletry items, helping him out. But we had this moment after that where I'd taken him to get something to eat. And so we're just in the parking lot of like that fast food place. And, by this time it's night. It's kind of an empty parking lot. There's no one around us. And he's just kind of eating on the hood of the car, and I'm just talking to him, right? And he just really opened up about his struggles and what was going on. He kind of got emotional, and I just really felt led. I actually opened up to this guy about some things that were going on in my life, and what was going on with me. And there was something freeing in, like, this guy's going to go to Florida. The anonymity of that, and it was just on a personal level. Like, yes, I am a cop, but I'm a person. I'm a spirit. I have a soul, just like you. We just connected on this human level where it really almost felt spiritual. No, it did. And
Hey, God puts people in
like,
our lives sometimes for a reason, right?
yeah. So things that I have not told some of my closest friends, things that struggles that I have, I kind of just laid bare to this guy, and he did the same. And it was just kind of this connection. We didn't sit there and boohoo in the parking lot, but it was just, I felt very connected to him. And yes, you could feel, I mean, this is a God thing. And you kind of felt this, I don't know, like, maybe the spirit, you just kind of felt this peace.
Yeah.
And then, I made arrangements, like helped him get a bus ticket, and got him where he was going to go. And that's not to say that, like, oh, John did a good job. I was very blessed to be in that moment with that guy. And it was very humbling, and a lot of emotions tied behind that encounter and how personal it got. And I've never seen that guy again. I never will see him, at least not on this earth. But I'm still just thankful for that encounter.
That's beautiful, John. I love that story. That's excellent, man. Thank you for sharing it. Last question. I've had you here over an hour, so I won't take up too much more of your time. But last question is advice to new officers or candidates who are looking to become police officers.
My advice would be this. If you want to go into this profession, with a servant's heart. You have to really want to help other people, and really be about relationships, because relationships make the world go round. And even in serving other people, when we have these kind of high speed stories, the stories where you're having to use force, that's even in service to, because you're thinking of the community and go, hey man, I've got to meet the wolf at the gate right here because I don't want this guy to prey on someone else. So you don't have those where you get in a physical altercation with someone, or you shouldn't because you want to get in a physical altercation. It's like, hey, I'm here. I've been placed here. If this is what you want to do, it's kind of like I'm your Huckleberry moment because you're not going to find my mother. Um, and so you even do that in a way of serving others. And I think if you understand the value of relationships and connecting with people, you'll be fine in this career. But that is the main thing I'd say going forth. The kind of the us against them mentality that kind of exists or used to, um, don't fall into that. Like that is your community, and you are there to serve them.
Absolutely, man. Words of wisdom right there. And it's so true. Even when you get a quote bad guy, you're going to be shocked to find out you might end up in the booking room with that guy later, and you're going to get an understanding of why this guy's like this. And you might have a moment with him where it catches you off guard and you're like, wow, I have some real empathy for this guy. Like, it's not just, people think it's just you slamming bad guys in the cell and going back out there and catching more. People are more complex than that. And like you said, you got to be prepared to have some relationships with people that it is exhausting. I mean, it really is, and you have to be prepared for that because otherwise you can't really do your job. You can't be the faceless, nameless arm of the law. You can't be Clint Eastwood. That's a movie. That's not true. That's not real life, you know? So, man, those are great words, brother. Hey, we've gotten an hour here to get to know you. So I want to hear about what's going on with Shield Protection Products. What do you have going on the side here?
So, yeah, this is a business that myself and a co-owner who's also in law enforcement started. That's our own brand of pepper spray, the only pepper spray that is made by actual cops.
Very
And
cool.
just a short thing on that. Looking on that side of the house, the non-lethal side of the house, with what was out there, we realized there were a lot of people that knew how to run a website, but if you called them and asked them some questions about when did I use pepper spray, what kind of pepper spray, or what kind of other non-lethal self-defense tools would be good for me, it's a bunch of people with no experience. And so we saw there was this vacuum, and we said, let's take our experience and we think we can offer some help to people. So we've got training videos that go along with the product that give people some knowledge, because we realized how many people were just kind of blindly purchasing these products and thinking they were safe just because they were carrying it. And you and I know that there's a little more to it than that, than just throwing pepper spray in your pocket or your purse or a taser or anything else, and never giving it another thought and thinking you're magically going to rise to the occasion one day. So we thought there was a need there, and we were trying to fill it.
What a unique idea, rather than just ordering a case of pepper spray out of Galls, and just handing them out, which is what's typically done. You're creating the products and also giving information and guidance on them. I mean, this is a really cool idea. Did you come up with this all on your own? Do you have a partner or anything?
I do. So yeah, I have a partner. He's active in law enforcement. He's the chief of an agency in Georgia, and it just kind of developed into this. We realized that there was a need there, especially on the civilian side, because I tell people, look, if you've never fired a firearm, you never had a gun before, you can find tons of good firearms instructors and educate yourself.
Sure.
But on the non-lethal side, if you don't know anything about non-lethal self-defense products, try to go find an instructor. I mean, you can throw a rock in Georgia and hit an NRA instructor. I say that. I mean, there's a lot of good knowledge out there, but on our side of the house, I mean, half of it's this kind of janky stuff, manufactured in China that I wouldn't give to a stranger because I just don't trust it. So we said, let's step in and be selective about what we sell, and let's empower people with some knowledge that may not know.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I love the whole idea. If you want to order this and you're not in law enforcement, can you, I don't even know, can you ship throughout the country, pepper spray and all that? You can ship that, right?
We can, and actually, overwhelmingly, we sell to civilians. There's a couple of states that limit the size and how hot it can be, but the good news is we have that in our shipping profile. So if you try to order, let's say one of the big ones that's pictured there, and it can't ship to your state, we won't let it ship, and then you'll just have to search. You'll have to pick one that would go. And there's a couple of states that are like that, but for the most part, we can ship anywhere. And every one of them has a QR code. You just scan it, and there's about a 10-minute training video to put some concepts into your head if it's your first time ever dealing with pepper spray.
Excellent, man. Awesome. At shieldprotectionproducts.com. A link for that will be in the show notes for sure. John, it was an honor having you on, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I thank you for what you do and kind of putting this out there for people.
Thank you for that, sir. Let me do the outro here. Can you hang on for just a couple minutes?
Absolutely.
Right. The great John Hill, ladies and gentlemen, did not disappoint with the stories. Had some really great ones. So thank you for him coming on. Really, really fun one. Guys, thank you for all the rating and reviewing that you're doing. I have to remember to mention the Instagram. The show has an Instagram page. Please go there and give that a follow. And also YouTube. All these interviews are going up on YouTube. So if you want to see, who are these guests that he's having on, and you want to see some of the things we talk about, the graphics I put up on the screen, or you just want a video component to the podcast, it's there for you. You can easily find it under Things Police See. This is a time of the show where I thank the Patreon sergeants. You also can become the rank of sergeant in the TPS world by going to the link in the show notes. Who I'm talking about is the great Andy Biggs, Greg Gadboy, the great Adam Mihal, Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinedo, the great John Shoemaker, Lauren Simpson, ladies and gentlemen, the handsome Lane Campbell, Seth Wright, the great James Rose, Tony Fahey, the great Ben Peters, Braden Walker, thank you, sir, Jason Lau, I love you, buddy. The great Mike Wynn, Sasha McNabb, the great Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch, Sean Clifford, Dennis Carrasquillo, ladies and gentlemen, Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles, check out his podcast, George Tessier, see you at church, brother, Nick Noose, the great Scott Young, Thomas Connell, Wayne M. Miller, retired ATF and author, check him out, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, love you, buddy, awesome woodwork, check him out, Doug and Kelly Newman, I'll see you at church, love you guys, Joe DeFries, the great Dave Ellman, everybody, Elliot Sykes, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother, be safe out there, Christian, thank you for subscribing, buddy, Jace Crow, the great Brad Thompson, Kyle Roberts, everybody, Zach Haney, the great Nancy Hammond, and Clark Lockup. Woo! Guys, taking my win to say all those names, and I love it. I want more on there. Let's do it. The support is really great and really needed. I appreciate it, like I say all the time. The end of the month comes, I got all my bills, the mortgage, everything else to pay, and then I have this little fund from the Patreon supporters that can pay for all the show expenses and then some. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.